Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the Wilson Center, the living memorial to Woodrow Wilson. We are nonpartisan. We were founded by Congress, and we look forward to making policy recommendations and working on issues of the day with the administration, with Congress, and with others. Today, we are focusing on workforce development, and we are very fortunate to have with us the Foreign Minister of Liechtenstein, who will give us some remarks on how they are implementing this workforce development program in Liechtenstein and with companies based here in the U.S. To introduce her, there is no one better than Liechtenstein's ambassador to the United States, George Schwabe. I give you the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Director Quinlan, for the warm welcome here at the Wilson Center, and welcome to all of you in the room and online on behalf of the Embassy of Liechtenstein. I'm very happy we could team up today with the Wilson Center on this important issue. We've been in a very long and good partnership with the Wilson Center's Global Europe program, and of the many successful events we had, today is certainly a highlight, because promoting apprenticeship is a key priority for Liechtenstein, for an economy like ours, highly diversified, highly integrated, highly innovative, but also highly limited in domestic resources. The investment in skilled labor is really our lifeblood. It's as simple as that. It's the people who maintain the integrity of an economy and its capacity to adjust and to innovate. And I'm therefore very happy that for the first time, Liechtenstein contributes to National Apprenticeship Week. We believe in our strong partnership with the United States, and we believe that the US economy can benefit from the advancement of apprenticeships, just as the Liechtenstein economy has. As I have toured the United States and discussed this with our companies and local authorities, I also saw that there are challenges that we have to address. It's not easy to give apprenticeships the status in the educational system that it deserves. It needs a collective effort between the private sector and the educational system and the authorities. And there's also sometimes a stigma attached to apprenticeships, a stigma that vocational training is somewhat a lesser course of education. And for us, for Liechtenstein, this couldn't be further from the truth. For us, apprenticeships are a success story that deserves to be told again and again. And I'm happy we can tell that today in the United States. I do very much look forward to our panel discussion. We'll just be able to witness, but before that, it is my distinct honor to introduce to you Her Excellency Dominique Hasler, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Education and Sport of Liechtenstein. Minister Hasler comes to her position with the experience of having been an educator herself and of having had leadership position in Liechtenstein's social institution responsible for elderly persons and disabled persons. She has served a full term in the previous government with the files on home affairs, education and environment. And since March 2021, we're fortunate to have her as Liechtenstein's chief diplomat. And I know, Minister, that the issue we're discussing today is very dear to your heart. And I'm ceding you the floor for your remarks and to kick off the discussion we'll witness afterwards. Thank you very much.
Dear Director Quinlan, dear participants of today's event, dear ladies and gentlemen online and live here at the Wilson Center. I'm very grateful to the Wilson Center for hosting this event together with Liechtenstein. Today's discussion extends the long history of excellent cooperation with your institution, and I thank you for that. Most importantly, this is an excellent contribution to National Apprenticeship Week, and I'm glad that we can share our perspective on this very, very important topic. Let me thank in particular the representatives of the US government joining us today, and also most warmly welcome the representatives of our Liechtenstein companies, Hilti, Ivo Clark, Kaiser, LGT and Reistech. They have a very active presence in the United States and will sure have a lot of concrete input to this discussion. Promoting apprenticeships is such an important issue for me, and I will explain to you why. As Minister of Foreign Affairs, a central task of mine is promoting economic cooperation between Liechtenstein and our partners around the globe, including the United States. My goal as Minister of Education is to ensure that the best schooling and training is available to as many people as possible. The issue of apprenticeships is where both of my rules meet. It represents one of these precious examples where education and foreign policy reinforce each other and where we can use synergies to advance both. Let me get started and give you Liechtenstein's perspective on why apprenticeships are important. In Liechtenstein, apprenticeships are really the backbone of our economy and the most important driver of our success as a high-quality and innovation-focused workplace. In all sectors of the economy, young people get trained on the job and receive vocational training at school. We call that the dual educational system. Our only natural resources are our brains, our skills, and our ingenuity. That is what we have to nourish, and that is what the Liechtenstein government is strongly committed to. Every year, after they have completed their 9 years of mandatory school, our young people make a choice about their future. More than half of them choose a profession in which they want to get training on the job and in school. A third chooses higher secondary education, and a bit more than 10% choose a buffer year in which they continue school while they decide on their future. So unlike in many other countries, apprenticeships are the rule, not the expectation in Liechtenstein, and the young people entering that career path are the pride of our society. Apprenticeships are key in services such as tourism, finances or IT, but also in the more technical professions underpinning our domestic and foreign industrial production. Production and manufacturing make up almost half of our economy, so it's evident that we place a very high emphasis on that sector. This sector also constitutes our predominant economic footprint in the United States, with over 5,000 jobs. In Liechtenstein, we face a notorious shortage in skilled workforce. Accordingly, our companies have to provide a competitive environment to attract the best and the brightest. Salary and salary expectation are, of course, an important consideration, but it would be a great mistake to think that this is the only factor. Young people, in particular, need to see how a company helps them fulfill their potential, nourish their interests and talents, and show them career pathways. Consequently, the choice of a particular apprenticeship needs to offer perspective rather than restrict one's career path for the future. This is why apprenticeships need to be certified in a manner that makes them widely recognized. They need to come not only with the promise of future development in the company, but with role models that have actually pursued such careers. And they need to allow for the transition to higher education, including university education, when people choose so later on. If done right, The benefits for students and companies alike are clear and tangible. Throughout the pandemic, we have seen in Liechtenstein a very high degree of loyalty between companies and their employees, and generally see a low degree of workers' fluctuations than others do. We see consistently high salaries for highly skilled employees. And we see quite often indeed people who have pursued the path on an apprenticeship ending up in the very top leader positions, often if they have complemented their education later on with specific additional degrees. From our own experience, I can tell you that our lean structures and centralized education system have helped set up our vocational training, so it can meet the challenges of the future. Of course, we do need continued commitment and investment into that system. We are glad to share our experience, and I'm convinced that what works on a small scale can also hold important lessons for larger applications. This is what we want to promote here in the United States. Today, there is a very good start for that. We can also build on best practices of companies that have gone ahead individually or in cooperations with others. Of course, we need political will to provide the necessary benchmarks for a successful system of apprenticeships, and we need political will to address some of the negative stereotypes still associated with the career path. Success stories help, and so does the open exchange of experience and ideas. In this spirit, I really look forward to hearing from the private sector where the obstacles and challenges lie, and from the administrative side, what the proposals for solution are. I particularly invite today's participants to talk about their experience in promoting apprenticeships. The economy of the future brings with it manifold challenges and opportunities that apprenticeships can help address. From skilled labor shortages to digitalization and the importance of STEM. This is an area where cooperation is beneficial to all. And it is my hope that we can make a concrete contribution today to that end, and thereby also the objectives of National Apprenticeships Week. Thank you very much for your attention.
I'm going to sit only because that way they'll get the
That's
microphone. So, thank you so much, Madam Minister.
Thank you.
That was really enlightening for us, especially the fact that more than half of the students are choosing to go this route. Can you tell us what you're doing to encourage that? Because it can't be easy to know early on what you want to do for your future.
So thank you very much for this question. I could talk about this topic for hours because it's a topic very important for me. But perhaps you just let me highlight 3 points. First of all, I think it is very important that there is no competition between the vocational training and the high school or student way. So you really have to build up a system where both is possible and where also the people where are going to have a vocational training are able to have an access to university afterwards. So you really need a transparent and interlinked system. And what I do think it's also important that you really have to translate and to introduce this system very early on to the parents, because there are still stereotypes. Mm-hmm. And also in Liechtenstein, you still have a high rate of parents saying it's important that my child can go to the university. So we really have to show the return on invest from vocational training from very early on and be in a very close dialogue with parents. Second, we have to start very early, and we do start in the kindergarten, to really bring the STEM subjects very, very near to the children. We have a peppermint laboratory, we call it, in Liechtenstein. And there from
Sounds wonderful.
so peppermint, mint is in German, it stays for STEM. So we really try to create a framework where the young students from kindergarten to high school level can really expose to fun projects that utilize math skills, engineering, coding, and more. Because what we do see is we lose the interests in STEM subjects, especially when it comes to young girls at the age about 12. So we have to be very early to build up their interest and to integrate them to our curriculum and to our goal that we want to give them also the opportunity to be interested in STEM subjects, because they are very important when it also comes to vocational training. And third, you have to have a strong cooperation with the economy. And that's a long way, because doing vocational training needs to give economies which give a lot of energy to this system, and you have to show them the return on invest. So this is something in Liechtenstein where we have a really, really close cooperation and a really, really close dialogue between the economic area and the educational system. We have to hear from them what they need, which skills they need for the future, and we have to translate this to our curriculum. But that's work. Dialogue is always work, and so I think that's the third goal, which I think is very important, that there is a structural cooperation between the economic area and the educational system.
Oh. I think with a degree in both teaching and an MBA, you're very well placed to put that into practice. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I'd like to invite our panelists to come up, and we will have some further discussion about this. So first, and for our online audience, let me make some introductions. We have here representatives who work on this issue both in the business world and in the policy world and in the civil society sector. So I think we are actually very well placed to look at all the aspects of this as we go forward. So I want to welcome here today first Zach Boren, who is a senior policy program manager in the Center on Labor, Human Services, and Populations, where he deals with a variety of apprenticeship-related projects. And he's an expert on registered apprenticeship and equal employment opportunities, so very important as part of this. And then we have also Mark Judge, who is a supervisory program analyst at the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Apprenticeship. And so please note that there is such an office, and that is important for all of our people who are paying attention online. He oversees a team responsible for both the development and review of apprenticeship-related regulations, legislation, and formal policy guidance and recommendations intended for use with a broad audience, including all of the folks that we are hoping to draw into this discussion today. And then I'd also like to welcome Anne-Marie Harrison, who is Senior Manager for Social Impact at Hilti North America. Hilti is a family-owned Liechtenstein company that specializes in some very innovative machine tool and construction-related products, including software. So you can check that out online if you're intrigued by that. And I can think of no better group to discuss some of the issues related to this today. So thank you all for coming and for your presence. If you are online and want to send questions, don't forget you can totally do that. So send them to us, and I'll be on the lookout for them, okay? But I'm going to take the privilege and ask some questions of my own first, okay? And just in my mind, it seems that over the past few years, we've seen an increasing interest in apprenticeship programs. You've probably seen that in your business too. And And these are people who are considering how best to enter the workforce in these days. How are you each in your specific arenas ensuring that these opportunities are well known? I think that sometimes it must be difficult to choose such a program if there's not already adequate information. So I think I'll start with you, Zach, but then I'll go to Anne-Marie, if that's all right, and then come back to you, Mark, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a great question. I think it's important to kind of take a step back beyond what Urban Institute is doing on apprenticeship and where we've kind of been as a country around apprenticeships. Really, when I started on apprenticeships almost a decade ago, there were about 375,000 apprenticeships across the U.S. Most of them are in construction at that time, and then still today. Most are still in the construction trades. But since then, the Congress and through 3 administrations, there's been a huge increase on the federal level and at the state level in terms of investment in apprenticeships. So those investments have really helped kind of draw us up from that 375,000 to, Mark can probably correct me, but I think it's somewhere around 600,000 U.S. apprentices in a variety of different industries. We've seen a lot of growth in tech, in healthcare, in other places, manufacturing, where apprenticeships are becoming more popular. And I think that's because of that investment and kind of business, schools, industries, and from the bully pulpit, we've seen President Obama, President Trump, and now President Biden all talk about apprenticeships. So there's been this huge increase. As a part of that, Urban Institute's been blessed with some investments to help
Always
companies.
helpful.
Yeah, to really help research apprenticeships, evaluate them, but also do them on the ground with companies. So one of the projects we've been working on over the last 3 years, this is our 4th year of a youth apprenticeship intermediary project. So it's really to go out and attract companies to starting youth apprenticeships for young people aged 16 to 21. It's similar to what you might see in Liechtenstein or in Germany or Switzerland, where young people are really starting their apprenticeships at the secondary school level. And so that has been wildly successful. We've been able to attract over 1,200 new youth apprentices just through our project. Now there's 4 other youth intermediaries that cooperate with us. We've supported 30 companies, companies like Pfizer, for example, got in the game for the first time on their apprenticeships and starting a national program, which has been really exciting to see that program grow and thrive. But also in other industries, in tech, in manufacturing, in even automotive, the automotive industry. So Automotive Service Excellence is one of our companies that we've worked with that is now building automotive tech apprenticeships all across the country at the high school and secondary level. And I think that's really important to really help think about how the country can drive apprenticeship to a younger age, where people don't spend decades in low-wage jobs and can spend them in high-skill occupations and training.
Yeah, the point Minister Hasler was making actually to us that start early. Anne-Marie, would you like to weigh in next?
Sure. Yeah. So to level set very quickly, so I will be approaching these questions really from the social impact lens. Our global headquarters certainly has a more formal apprenticeship model, but what we do in the U.S. and Canada is very much, a little bit more non-traditional, if you will. So how we engage at a young age is we really invest in our public school systems, right? So specifically in Texas, we have one of the lower socioeconomic in our public school system in Dallas, for example. And then, so how we invest there is we are the tool providers for all of their career tech schools. We give our time and our resources. We go in early. We talk to parents. We bring them on campus and show them all the different things that they can do within Hilti as a tradesperson and as maybe a more professional role. And so we spend a lot of time in that space. We are kind of really working with our customers to do this collective impact piece where they will pay for this training or we will split training depending on, and then very much handhold, some of our community partners to then find employment. And so we're taking a very, I would say, maybe strong and robust approach with individuals to try to find employment through different apprenticeship models, if you will. But I would say the way we invest, it's on a large scale. We invest financially into programs to bring women into construction. We bring them in and hire them for 6 months and train and upskill. And so it's kind of a large variety. But I will tell you, just kind of quite operational, one tool that we use to get people to really understand the value of things like the trades and construction are investing in tools like we have a career calculator that it shows a young student who can't really wrap their head around what it means to be an electrician over the span of time. But if I can show them this calculator and say, okay, if you live in Georgia and you want to be an electrician, this is where you start and this is where you can finish and you can own your own company. And so for us, as I talk about being in the schools, it's really just making it tangible, it's simplifying, and it's just sharing that they could have a very vibrant career in the trades if they so choose, and that they have companies who are willing to support them. The workforce gap for construction is at the greatest it's ever been. And so we have no other option than to physically be in schools sharing with the kiddos, what needs to be done.
Wow, recruitment starts early.
Very early.
Absolutely. Mark, talk to us a little bit about this from your perspective.
Well, certainly, and I thank you again for the opportunity. It's a great honor to be here with such distinguished panelists and with the Foreign Minister and the Ambassador. I would say this, a couple of things, just to reiterate what Zach and Anne-Marie have already said. Certainly, it is very, very important that in order to change the perception of apprenticeship as being limited to the skilled trades, to jobs that are dirty, dark, and dangerous, as has been said in the past, it's important to point out to young people particularly and to their parents through promotional efforts and through public events such as National Apprenticeship Week that registered apprenticeship does provide a promising and a viable career alternative pathway for people of all ages, not just young people, but people who are in career-changing mode or who perhaps have come out of the military or from other experiences. And so there's a real opportunity that we have, and the opportunity has been, I'll say, turbocharged a bit by the fact that we have received considerable funding from Congress in recent years. We have the various grant programs that have expanded dramatically, hundreds of millions of dollars appropriated by Congress for the purpose of providing grants to workforce intermediaries such as the Urban Institute and to states and to other organizations, basically to provide seed money to incubate promising and innovative approaches to apprenticeship development and growth, not just in construction, which is obviously most of apprenticeship today, as has been the case for many decades in this country, have been focused on the construction trades, the skilled, allied skilled trades. And that's certainly true in Canada as well. But certainly in Europe, there has been increasing there has been for quite some time a good deal more diversification of apprenticeship, and our department is very committed to expanding those opportunities and to providing grant funds to organizations and to entities and to states that have some promising prospects for expanding into areas such as financial services and healthcare and advanced manufacturing. Of course, advanced manufacturing is, of course, what Hilti does substantially for the construction industry, but it's very much an advanced manufacturing organization. These are all very, very information technology. Indeed, there are so many areas, frankly, where apprenticeships are being considered. For example, teaching. We found that increasingly in the last couple of years, states and localities, in order to address the teacher shortages, have been turning to apprenticeships. And these have been embraced by the teachers' unions, interestingly. And so there are opportunities here in some unexpected areas for growth and for development. And we're really looking forward to the opportunity in the coming years to really utilize the grant opportunities that we've been given by the Congress to expand apprenticeship into these areas and to highlight, particularly for young people, the fact that this is a very viable and desirable opportunity and alternative to the expense of a 4-year university degree.
I think that's one of the things that, of course, is on people's minds as they're looking at all of these options, right? That and the issue of workforce development. People want to invest in something where they know they're going to be able to grow their skills over time. And that's where sometimes the link up with local educational institutions is so important. I think I'm going to toss it to all of you, but it might be more for you, Anne-Marie, and that is there a wish list for how you can cooperate with educational institutions in order to make this a very robust program?
Yes, I would say, for Hilti, we've kind of embraced this concept of meeting people where they're at and then bringing them on board to upskill and reskill, right? So that perfect profile for us is really someone who's willing, agile, who's determined, who wants to come to work. So what does that mean? We built a framework essentially where we have partnered with different nonprofit partners to identify this profile of person, where we will then provide functional supports, upskilling, reskilling based off what they want to do with our customers and our partners, as well as some of those life supports, right? So there are a lot of barriers, not only the stereotype of something like construction, but for the communities that we serve, there are a lot of barriers that make it almost impossible for some of these future workers, talent, to come to work. And so it's really rethinking how we employ, right? We can't buy all the talent that's out there. Absolutely not. So we have to rethink how we employ. We have to get partners. We have to help with transportation, with childcare, and all of those things. And if we can do that, then the loyalty, we believe that it will never go away. And so that's what we're starting to work on. And we've had so much excitement within the industry that we can do this too. And so now we're starting to share, kind of that more, I guess, progressive thinking way of employment that we call holistic employment.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Zach?
Yeah, I would just add, education institutions are such a critical factor in how we build apprenticeship programs, because they are literally providing, half of the education of an apprentice. And how they engage is really important too. So, what we've seen from a couple of our studies, I'll give you an example from we looked at Iowa's expanding model of high school-based apprenticeships, which is really, I think, innovative in the country. They've had 2 governors come in and invest really heavily in apprenticeships more broadly, and have seen this tremendous expansion. I believe they're one of the fastest growing states in terms of apprenticeship for being a pretty small state. But what they've done is really innovative by engaging high schools, by becoming the sponsor of a registered apprenticeship program. So they take all the administrative burden of operating an apprenticeship program in cooperation with employers. And we've seen this model really grow since about 2017. So we met with, we had a chance to talk with Central Des Moines, which is a STEM school in the middle of Des Moines, and they were the first high school to adopt this model. And now they have more than 50 apprentices that are starting their apprenticeship in IT, in childcare, in manufacturing. They partnered with John Deere for some really terrific apprenticeships in manufacturing in particular. And they have a real focus on diversity too, and really thinking about how you bring young people of diverse backgrounds to make sure that they have really terrific opportunities. And that's the importance of this, is because they are the connector between a young person's experience in school, where you have caring adults thinking about that child's future, and the work world, where they can make connections with businesses. And I think that's really important. The other model that we see that's growing is the community college model. So community colleges sort of being, this is sort of engine for apprenticeships as well, where they can connect what young people are learning in the classroom to real jobs in the community. And I think that's so important because you have to have this dialogue in between what businesses are needing on the ground in terms of a skilled worker and how we're bringing young people up to that skill level that businesses need, and what they're learning in the classroom, which may not always be relevant. But I think connecting these two dots in between what young people are doing in either in community college or in high school to business is so critically important for our future expansion of apprenticeships in the U.S.
I'm pretty sure every single one of us could name a course that we had that we didn't think was relevant to life, and then turned out to be. So, Mark, did you want to say anything?
Sure. No, there's so many really interesting points here that both Anne-Marie and Zach have made, and I would reiterate all of them. And I would just mention one thing I think that emerges here. It sort of makes the United States a bit distinctive from, say, Switzerland or Austria or Liechtenstein, which are relatively, comparatively speaking, homogenous and compact nations, is that in the United States, you have obviously a transcontinental country, a tremendously diverse population, and obviously we put a great premium at the Labor Department in trying to reduce barriers to participation in apprenticeship by populations, underserved populations that have historically been underrepresented in either apprenticeship or in the labor market at large. You know, women, Black Americans, Latinos, people who live in rural communities, a wide range of groups. So there is definitely a desire to utilize apprenticeship as a means of overcoming barriers to the workplace. And it's a really excellent model when it is properly utilized that way. The other thing I'd note also is the fact that given the sprawling nature of the country and our federal system, which can sometimes be vexing but is sometimes also a benefit, one of the advantages of the federal system has been, you may have heard the expression, the laboratory of the states. Well, that's literally what's happening and has been happening in recent years in apprenticeship. The states and localities in many instances, and we recognize this on the federal level, are taking the lead in innovation and developing new ideas and new concepts for apprenticeship systems, partnerships. This is very, very important. There's an organic movement in a number of locations, whether it's Zurich Insurance out in Chicago, or whether it's the South Carolina system, or the North Carolina system, or any of these localities that have really come up with some terrific ideas for how to expand quality apprenticeships. And really, our idea is to try to give them the support that they need financially and administratively to build on that story of success.
Yeah. It sounds like this is actually present all across the U.S., stronger in some places than others. Is that dependent on the companies that are working in those areas to build it like Hilti has done? Or is this something that you see really growing as a wave over time? I think, Zach, you were saying this at the start, there's way more people that are doing apprenticeships now than there have been before.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that that Mark's answer is absolutely right, that the states are really driving the excitement around apprenticeships. I think of a couple states that are really kind of innovating and making those connections for business. What business needs today is really incentives to engage in apprenticeships, because most businesses are carrying the full freight and cost of bringing an apprentice up to an elite professional level. So when you think about the costs, you're talking about the cost of mentoring, the cost of education, the cost of creating the apprenticeship program, the curricula. And there, previous to 2016, there were literally no funding incentives at all for on the federal level for companies to invest in apprenticeships. But we've seen where states like South Carolina innovated in the early '80s by putting in a tax credit for apprenticeship and creating a division within their economic development that would go out and sell and organize apprenticeships. This made it extremely attractive for companies to say yes. Yes, we'll organize it for you. Yes, we'll give you money. Yes, we'll give you the connections to the technical community college. And you've seen the 700% growth in apprenticeships in South Carolina over about 15 years. So it's been this kind of Cinderella tale in South Carolina. The same has happened, as I mentioned earlier, in Iowa, where they've really kind of gone and did this grow your own program across the state. But it was between a couple of governors that were really well invested, and I would argue a really great state director in Iowa,
Absolutely.
who hustles across the state to make sure every company knows the value of apprenticeship.
Right.
And then companies like John Deere that go and talk about how well apprenticeship has worked in their company. And there's not a better company to talk about apprenticeships in Iowa than John Deere. They're going to sell it by themselves. And then lastly, I'm excited about what's happening in California. California has now made a 3-year commitment of $230 million to expand their apprenticeship system. Governor Gavin Newsom has made this this big goal of 500,000 apprentices by 2030. Today they're at about 100,000. So you're really seeing where states are really driving and putting federal and state dollars behind these apprenticeship initiatives, and companies are going to follow that because they want to get in the game when they see big players, competitors adopt apprenticeship and do well. They're likely to adopt the same model.
Interesting. We've talked about what companies gain from this, and also what states are doing to encourage it, because this is important for employment and workforce development and retention. So I am going to ask you something that's going to sound kind of basic, but here it is. If you're an apprentice, tell me what you're getting out of this. Are you getting a credential? When you choose this path, what do you take with you when you come out of this apprenticeship program? I wonder, are these the community colleges that people are working with, are they offering college credits? Is this something where you can imagine maybe later, if they choose to do another path, their skills will translate into something at another level? So it's a lot of questions, but I'm just tossing it open to y'all.
Well, let me try opening, and I'd love to hear from Anne Marie's perspective and Zach's on this, because I think there are a lot of facets to it. We at the Department of Labor basically try, our position, and it is accurate, is that apprenticeship is a means of being able to earn while you learn. In other words, one of the advantages to potential apprentices that they are actually being paid as they are in this learning process, and that there is an opportunity, a pathway to a promising career. And one of the other aspects of it is that at the end of upon successful completion of a program, the department confers a portable credential, a certificate of completion, which is recognized. And that isn't necessarily the only credential, by the way, that an apprentice might earn upon completion of a program. It could very well be, as Zach was saying, that if they're in an automotive apprenticeship, they might earn an ASE certification or some other professional certification as a result of completing the training. So there is that aspect, the fact that you're choosing a pathway that does not necessarily commit you to being very deeply in debt at the end of 4 years, but rather an opportunity to actually put money in your pocket rather than having it taken out during that process. And so that's, from a financial perspective, certainly there is a good story to tell about this. But I'd like to sort of give maybe Anne-Marie a chance to
Yeah.
Especially the
thank you.
holistic approach that Hilti is taking.
Yeah, so I would say, with the earn as you learn kind of definition, I had mentioned our apprenticeships vary on scale on how we invest and how we engage with future talent. There's not necessarily accreditations that come with the programs that we're supporting. Of course, when we partner with customers and we put them through a skilled training, like I said, an electrician, they do get licenses. But for us, what they would take away is a sustainable career, right? And this opportunity, and mind you, it's a program that we've just piloted this year, and so we know that we will have to recalibrate a few times. But not only is it a sustainable career, but it's very intentional exposure to other pathways, right? So when they join the company under this holistic framework, we spend about 15 to 20% of the time on very intentional exposure to different pathways within our organization, from distribution centers to sales to whatnot. And we also do the same thing with our customer base. So if we have a team member that comes in and actually wants to potentially leave Hilti and go on a job site, we're okay with that. We're not running these apprenticeship programs for us to keep them necessarily. Mind you, we want to keep a lot of them. But if they want to go on a job site, then we will pull in one of our customers. We will make a very thorough introduction, and we will support them on that pathway as well. So at the end of the day, this idea of sustainable employment is our cornerstone. That's what keeps us going, and that would be, I would say, the best thing that they could take away from these types of programs.
That it's portable. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, I would just add, at its simplest form, apprenticeship for young people is offering another option. The options today are, the college for all mantra. You have to go get a 4-year degree, or you go in the military. We've all met someone, and think back when you were back in high school, you met someone who's just really better working with their hands than behind a desk. And this really offers that opportunity for that young person to succeed in a career. The data really bears this out too. When you compare apprentices versus college graduates, they're pretty competitive in terms of their rates of salary attainment. So apprentices on average earn about $77,000 when they complete their apprenticeship program. In comparison to college graduates, which is about mid-50s, but college grads tend to catch up later through their career. Over their lifetime, if you compared an apprentice for what they earn in comparison to their peers, it's about $300,000 more in wages and benefits. And we have a new report coming out this week, which I hope I can make a plug for.
Absolutely, go for it.
We're doing a new report on union-based apprenticeships for youth. And I think this is a really important report because about 54% of all apprenticeships in the U.S. are union-based. And that has a lot to do with how well apprentices are doing and our experience with apprenticeship. What we really see out of this program, out of young people getting into union-based apprenticeships, by that I mean unions cooperating with employers, is that young people are getting really good salaries through their apprenticeship, ultimately ending up earning in the high 70s when they complete either in construction. We looked at 3 organizations. Construction bricklaying in Michigan. We looked at the Seafarers, which is an organization that operates commercial vessels for apprenticeship. So you imagine, a person aboard the deck who's kind of managing either the cafeteria or navigation, things of that sort. Young people out of that program are earning $75,000 after 1 year of an apprenticeship. So really, really impressive rates. And then we also looked at 1199J, which is a healthcare organization up in New Jersey. And those young people getting into becoming LPNs, CNAs, really getting their foothold into the healthcare industry. I think all this is important because what most people lack in the workplace is a voice. And what these union-based apprenticeships offer is a voice in the workplace and training at the same time. And so young people are not only gaining a really good salary, but they're gaining access to a pension, to health care, and to a career that will sustain a family over the long term. I think that's what's really exciting about the fact that 50% of our system looks like that. And what we're growing, hopefully, is more apprenticeships that reflect these really good jobs that pay high wages that ultimately sustain families over the long term.
And I would just add to that, basically, the administration is very much on the same page on this, as is our Office of Apprenticeship. That really apprenticeships, as is true of all jobs, and the Secretary of Labor and the Secretary of Commerce recently issued a joint document called the Good Jobs Principles. And it certainly applies to apprenticeship as well. And basically, one of the things that they call for, basically, are jobs that have the promise of family-sustaining wages. And really, the focus of apprenticeship should be on jobs that hold out that promise. And it's really very important to make sure that we are developing apprenticeships either through unions, which through the collective bargaining process usually ensure that individuals are on that pathway, or in sectors where there is obviously some prospect for economic advancement by individuals. And so it's very, very important that we really make sure that apprenticeships are not simply a means of training people for jobs that have no prospect for advancement or entry into the middle class. It's very important.
So you've given me a great segue into my next question. But before I do that, I'm going to look at the audience, online audience too, please, and say, right, I'm going to open this up for questions. Right? So be thinking about this so that you have something to ask when I open it up. But I'm going to do one more just because it follows on really with what you have just been talking about. So everybody, take out your crystal ball, okay, and look into the future. I know it's tough, but we'll try. I mean, for many people entering the workforce today, they will shift jobs several times over the course of their career, and they might be working at the end of their career in a job or a sector that doesn't even exist yet. Mm-hmm. So as these specialized fields are invented in the future, how will the apprenticeship model adapt to meet that challenge? I know this is a really tough question to look in the future, but I just know y'all can handle it. So, Anne-Marie, do you want to start
sure.
first?
So I would say maybe really centered on the foresight to reskill, right? So the idea that you would take someone out of their current job to completely spend the time and resources to reskill them to accommodate a different job. Also potentially the ability to really look at what jobs actually require versus what potentially one would read on a job description if someone's entering the workforce. They're really thinking about what is necessary and what role do we play as employers to get someone to that point where they could successfully contribute to the responsibility of the role.
That makes sense. Mark, do you want to weigh in? Or
Sure. I mean, I'd be happy to. I mean, I think there are a number of aspects to your question that are very interesting. One of the things that, and I just want to put in a plug too, because when we look to our transatlantic partners, whether it's Liechtenstein or Switzerland, Germany, Austria, United Kingdom, one of the things that we have observed is that there is, in many of those countries, as I think the foreign minister alluded to, an opportunity to access higher education opportunities, both during and after a successful completion of the apprenticeship. In other words, what they have is what I think the Swiss refer to as permeability in their systems. In other words, an opportunity to access higher education upon completion of apprenticeship or even after the apprenticeship is over. So that's sort of a structural issue that is not, it relates to apprenticeship, but it really requires sort of a very open thinking about transitions workforce transitions and the ability of individuals to migrate across sectors and have opportunities. And just along the lines, again, of looking to our transatlantic partners, I want to just point out that tomorrow evening, our acting assistant secretary and the administrator of the Office of Apprenticeship are going to be starting a trip to Switzerland and to Liechtenstein. And they're going to be visiting Ambassador Miller, our ambassador, United States ambassador to Switzerland, is going to accompany them. And they'll be visiting some of the principalities' leading employers, such as the ThyssenKrupp Presta in Eschen, and also Iva Klarvaivet in Schaan. And they're going to have an opportunity to see firsthand the high-quality apprenticeship training that is offered by Liechtenstein companies, and to sort of see the dual model in operation. The dual model, I think, really is a very, very interesting, again, this permeability aspect of the dual model really holds out a lot of promise. If we can get American companies and potential apprenticeship sponsors to embrace it, that really would take us, I think, a long way toward what you're describing, Director, about having workers, apprentices, former apprentices, be able to do that sort of migration, occupational migration. Sorry.
Yeah, I would I would argue that apprenticeship allows companies to innovate in real time. Let me tell you a story about
I can't wait.
why that's true. So we looked at the Apprenticeship 2000 model. It's the first youth apprenticeship program really in the country. It's the longest lasting youth apprenticeship program. It started in 1994 and is still going strong today. It started with 8 companies, Swiss, German, Austrian, and U.S. companies, all coming together around Charlotte for starting apprenticeships in something called mechatronics. Mechatronics was not anything that the colleges were preparing for in 1994. So these 4 companies worked with Central Piedmont Community College to create their apprenticeship. And they literally went in and said, we need to build something called mechatronics. And the college went along. They built the curricula along with these 8 companies. And that's really kind of the success story here is you have businesses actually driving what's happening at the educational level to offer education in something that they really need to innovate and grow their companies. And it's something that we're continuing to do at Urban Institute. We're very grateful for our funders, the U.S. Department of Labor, to start a technical assistance center for occupations and standards. This is what we're creating is the foundation of what an apprenticeship is, what you need to teach apprentices on the job and in the classroom. And we're doing that in a variety of different spaces and in healthcare and information technology. We're even looking at occupations that are going to be changing through climate change. So we're looking at forest fire prevention specialists. In the past, we've built occupations for wind turbine technicians. So really thinking about what are the occupations that the country needs to be able to be prepared for what climate change has in store for us. And these worked out really well as both kind of on the research side, developing them for industry, but also as an intermediary. So we built out these frameworks for data analysts, for IT generalists, for cybersecurity specialists, for user experience designers, which I really did not know what that was before.
Tell me.
Well, it's actually the way that you can design a website so users find it friendly to use, and even helps for people who might have a disability to be able to navigate that website. And we use these to engage with Google and Microsoft to start their first national apprenticeship programs, and a bunch of other IT firms that you haven't heard of. But I think this is really exciting that the DOL has put this investment and really thinking about how do we build the foundational building blocks of what apprenticeship is going to look like and put those into really exciting areas for both business and for young people to come in and be in some really cool tech and climate jobs.
Well, and so much creativity too that
Yeah.
that you bring in that way, and I think that's one of the things that I always think is hardest to capture in any business or government, and that is to capture the creativity of workers coming in and new colleagues, and make sure you leave the space for that, which it sounds like this double model will do. So I challenged the folks in the audience. Do you have questions that you'd like to ask? We'll start here. Don't worry, I got you two in the back. We'll be coming there. Hi, Mike.
Thank you very much. A very interesting panel discussion. Obviously, the focus is on young people, apprentices. The way it's described in apprentices, it's forward-looking. It's looking forward. I'm just wondering, is there at the other end, are there apprenticeships for older people, maybe who've completed a career 20 years in a profession or something, and maybe they want to do this kind of work?
Okay. Do you want to try that one, and then we'll move to the back and take the two questions?
Well, basically, apprenticeships in this country, and I think this is true in Canada as well, in terms of, the European focus has been traditionally, over decades and centuries, to take youth, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, and to move them into the apprenticeship track and basically to, obviously get them while they're young. In this country, notably, I think the average age of an apprentice is in the late 20s. I think it's in that range. And so it's an older population, cadre, that we're talking about here. And so, and certainly people do start apprenticeships later in life as well. Indeed, part of our regulatory structure that we have is that there is a prohibition against discrimination on the basis of age. I mean, if you're 40 years of age or older, a program should not bar you from entry. That would not be legal under our regulations. So there's no bar, and indeed, I think many apprenticeship programs, either sponsored by the unions or by others, are very aware of and basically geared in many respects toward the older worker who may have migrated from the military or migrated from another occupation and who is looking to start afresh. So in that respect, the American system, I think, is a more adaptable model that way, that it's able to actually focus and include an older population than is generally the case in corresponding systems in Europe. Having said that, though, the fact that it is an older population and there hasn't been an awful lot of focus on youth apprenticeships has perhaps somewhat inhibited the growth of apprenticeship, because if you do also focus on a younger population while also helping the older population, you tend to help to alter the perception of apprenticeship. It's going to take time, a sustained effort, a sustained expenditure of money, and a sustained political will, as the foreign minister was saying, in order to sort of experience that transformation. But we are getting underway. And I think with patience and with perseverance, we're going to be able to not only serve the older worker who wants to change, but also really raise the expectation and alter the perceptions among young people, which is really critical to a growth trajectory.
I would just add that's a great research paper. Love to give me a good idea. But I would say a few years ago, AARP asked us that question when I was at the Department of Labor. And we did a search, and there were about 10,000 apprentices that were age 50 or older currently in the system. So a relatively small group of people, but we do see, companies that are interested in preparing career changers for a new industry. So Microsoft is a great example of that. They have something called the LEAP program, and they're currently doing it for software development, IT project management, and I'm working on 3 occupations for them right now. So they're going to be doing some new stuff. I don't want to get ahead of their announcement. But they are really thinking about bringing in, moms who are outside of the workforce for like during the pandemic to become career changers. I believe they even had a WNBA star that has now become a software developer, which I think is really innovative and cool. But they're doing this. The LEAP program is not just a U.S. program, but it's a global program. So they're focused on apprenticeships in Africa and India, across Europe. So really interesting stuff that Microsoft is coming out with in terms of building apprenticeships for older people.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we do both. We very much intentionally invest in K through 12 when it comes to STEM, construction, industry-related topics. The frameworks that I referenced earlier definitely go across all ages and phases, women coming back into the workforce, older adults and whatnot. So we are very, really the focus for some of these frameworks for us is really those emerging from crisis. Like I said, I'm kind of looking at it through the social lens, but we employ all ages and phases.
Okay. All right. There were questions in the back, so I'll take way in the back, and then I'm coming up to you. I have you on my side.
Yes, we've had Job Corps for many, many years. And of course, that's not an apprenticeship program, but it's for people who want to learn how to be a chef or what other things. Siemens, a German company in North Carolina, they have taken high school juniors that are very good in mathematics and put them into an apprenticeship program, and it's been amazing.
Yes.
Now, I don't want to sign. I don't want to say that I'm anti-union, but these right-to-work laws in South Carolina and North Carolina, a lot of companies, Japanese, Korean, you look to see where their manufacturing is. It's in those states that are right-to-work, that are non-union. Everybody knows this. Now, the ILO had an office in Torino, in Turin, for VOCED, going back to the 1970s, I believe. And that was mainly for third world countries, I think. But
I think it still exists.
It still exists,
Yes.
Right. I used to work for the Labor Department. That's why I know that. Okay, that's about it. So any comments on Job Corps as it relates to apprenticeships or Siemens in the Carolinas?
Can I take another question too, and bundle the comments on that, just so that we have
All right,
that knowledge and the question.
I'm Henry Hecker. I wondered, in creating these apprenticeship programs, how do they gear it for the economy in periods of recession? A company that's expanding, Google has become a very important company, probably subject to a great deal of personnel expansion. If a company is undergoing retractions, is more subject to recessions and changes in the economy, how do they handle the apprenticeship programs? Do they have to try to encourage people to retire early and then the apprentice moves up, or they just don't need as many of them? Perhaps you could expand on that.
Well, I would say, just as with any labor market issue, if there is a contraction in the economy, I would expect that an apprenticeship, and we've seen this, I think, historically, in terms of the overall apprenticeship completion numbers, that those numbers are not divorced from the general economy. And certainly during the pandemic, there was a bit of a downturn in the number of apprentice completers, which is now going back up. Similarly, in previous recessions, what tends to happen is that fewer apprentices may be hired during the period of economic recession, but that those numbers tend to rebound when that is over with. So apprenticeship is not immune from the general economic trends that go on. But if an employer is committed to the model, they will not simply dispense with apprenticeships for good the minute you hit an economic contraction. And most likely what will happen is there'll be some adjustment to the quantity of the apprenticeships that are offered at a particular time. With respect to Job Corps, certainly Job Corps, of course, is also under the umbrella of the Department of Labor, and we have a very good relationship with that office. And certainly individuals who complete Job Corps training successfully sometimes are do have an opportunity to go into an apprenticeship, a registered apprenticeship program, and they tend to do quite well. We certainly encourage, those linkages, not only with, in terms of linkages with the public workforce system. We find that our one-stop centers here in this country are magnificent resources for workers who are transitioning from perhaps a Job Corps environment or a military environment or some other work situation, looking for opportunities. And we really are focusing a lot of our efforts on utilizing those sort of connectivities in the workforce system to make people aware of a registered apprenticeship as a viable alternative. And certainly working with intermediaries such as Urban and others is vitally important. The one thing I would really emphasize, and I really want to stress this, is the importance of partnerships. An employer, unless it's a very large employer, like a Siemens or some really large multinational corporation, is usually not going to be able to initiate or pull off an apprenticeship program on its own. It needs partners. Not just educational institutions, as Zach was saying, but workforce intermediaries who know their way around the block and who can actually help to make the kind of connections that can sustain an apprenticeship program over time. So it's really very important that when we approach employers or other potential program sponsors, that we stress to them the importance of really having the network in place or joining a network that exists to try to basically have a multiplier effect, if you will, in a particular sector or a particular locality so that you can access resources on a more cost-effective basis.
Zach, anything to add?
Well, I mean, I would argue the same thing that Mark has on, apprenticeships aren't recession-proof. We saw that, during the pandemic induced recession was that apprenticeships dropped off for the first time in 2020. They were precipitously rising from 2013, and I haven't seen what the latest numbers are in 2021 if we're now rebounding and gaining some of those apprenticeships. But a lot of the apprenticeships had to go online. We didn't lose those jobs, but they went. And programs had to innovate during the pandemic to figure out how do we train this apprentice in a more virtual environment. Urban Institute was one of those. We hired our first youth apprentice, so we're also walking the walk on apprenticeship, and she is also doing a remote apprenticeship currently. In terms of the question about North and South Carolina as it relates to union-based apprenticeships, I think South Carolina did something really special in the way it really kind of brought together workforce development and economic development together to really attract companies to the state. What they had done was really kind of put money on the table to incentivize foreign companies to invest there through foreign direct investment. But then most companies, when they arrive, let's say your European multinational arrives here, and they look around and they're wondering, well, where are the apprenticeships? Where am I going to get talent from? And South Carolina really had that answer. South Carolina had that answer because they had built into their economic development system, experts on apprenticeship that were able to design those apprenticeship programs with the 16 technical colleges across the state. So, I would argue, during that time, South Carolina was really eating North Carolina's lunch when it came to foreign direct investment, and more states need to really kind of consider how they're connecting economic development to workforce development. That's the way we're going to be able to grow jobs.
Oh, this sounds like a very competitive environment. Anne-Marie, did you want to weigh in?
I think they captured it quite well.
All right, super. I'm going to go to the question here in the front.
I think you can hear me.
No, but the online audience can't hear you without the mic.
Okay. Well, thank you, Osvaldo Lopez from RiceTech, and thank you for your beautiful information. So I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball. And I know that maybe it's not the answer, but there's an answer, but it's worth the talk. I think there is a goodwill from companies and, you know, a representative from Liechtenstein to do this and invite companies to develop apprenticeships. However, how we're going to be facing when the system right now is rewarding to not work. An apprenticeship is a lot of work, and you get paid for it. However, the unemployment benefits are really making us difficult to get people, doesn't matter how. When this is going to stop in order for us to jump into this board? It's complicated. I'm not complaining, but I'm facing a reality, you know? Doesn't matter if I pay $15 the hour for a part-time apprenticeship program. The unemployment benefits are huge, and that's blocking us the good intentions or the goodwill.
I think I'm going to see if Mark, if you want to take that from the Department of Labor perspective.
Well, no, this is rather interesting. I mean, certainly, unemployment insurance is not intended to replace the long-term sustainability of a well-paying job that offers employee benefits and other advantages. So I think perhaps in terms of a long-term solution, I don't believe that unemployment insurance as a long-term solution is going to be very sustainable for most individuals over the course of many years. And indeed, there are limitations on the duration of unemployment benefits that are available. So I could certainly see in the short run perhaps that sort of calculation going on an individual basis. But over the long term, particularly in situations where the economy is growing, as is once again the case, and where indeed there are labor shortages, as is the case in many sectors at the current, and I think Anne-Marie alluded to that, in that sort of a situation where there's a general labor shortage, you're going to find, I think, just as a matter of economics, that salaries are going to be rising in certain sectors in order to attract the desired talent. So in that respect, I would think that apprenticeship, as long as the employer is offering a good wage and is going to be advancing that wage as is required under federal law as the apprentice progressively acquires occupational skills and competencies, and then is able to move into a career that has promise for further advancement. I should think that apprenticeship as a general proposition still is a very attractive opportunity for the vast majority of workers, particularly the young who are just starting off with their careers. And so I'm optimistic. I'm not that deeply concerned that my fellow individuals over at our office of we handle unemployment insurance, as you know, or supervise it for the nation in terms of its funding at the Department of Labor. I don't think that is there. Again, it's insurance. It's intended to basically tie people over for those unfortunate circumstances when there's recession or dislocation in the workforce. But I think as a sustainable solution, apprenticeship certainly has some considerable advantages.
Yeah, and just a couple of comments. I would say, one, to my point about finding that agile, willing person. So maybe it would be asking employers to look for those non-traditional partners for employment and take a little bit more of an intentional role in who and how they hire. Second would be to evaluate internally what's offered and really thinking about why do people stay at a job beyond the monetary reasons. And with those two things, I feel like that would be a good formula to kind of eliminate that thought perhaps.
And Zach, I think you had something you wanted to add as well.
Yeah, I would argue. I think that's the wrong question. I would argue the right question is why aren't there enough apprenticeships in the United States? If you look at us in comparison to our European counterparts, we have about 0.3% of Americans in the current labor market doing an apprenticeship. In Europe, it's more like 3 or 4%. So if you calculate that out, we should have somewhere in the range of over 10 million apprentices today. We have 600,000. So the incentives aren't there for business, and the incentives aren't there for, and the structure isn't there for young workers to get into apprenticeships. We looked at, I'll recall my study where we looked at union-based apprenticeships for young people. And what we found were there were a few barriers. There are some barriers at the federal level, some social and structural barriers. One is really for the 50% of the system is union-based construction. So one of the big barriers is young people can't do the math. So they literally can't pass the entrance test to be able to get the apprenticeship. The second big barrier is drugs. Young people are increasingly using marijuana, and a lot of apprenticeship programs have a drug test to be able to enter the apprenticeship program. So they literally can't pass the test to be able to get into the apprenticeship. And the third problem is parents. Madam Minister, you mentioned this earlier in your speech. In Liechtenstein, there's this stigma around young people going into the trades or going into an apprenticeship. And we find that same issue here in the U.S. where, a young person who's going into an apprenticeship, their parents are the first person to close the door on the apprenticeship. So I think there are some societal barriers, some economic barriers we have to get over. But first and foremost, we just don't have enough apprenticeships. The trades have to recruit 250 people for 25 jobs that are currently available. So there's an abundance of interest in apprenticeships, just not enough slots for young people to get into.
So we had one more question up here, didn't we? Yeah, okay, there we go. Last question from the audience, y'all. So.
Thank you. Thank you for your insights. I'm Chris Holden with Ivoclar. I think you addressed a couple of the questions that I wanted to ask, but the sense that I get as you're describing these, let's say the general situation, is that some of it feels organic to me as you're discussing how this happens and moves forward. And it seems that something more than simply organic needs to change. We talk a lot about, let's say, or at least my interpretation is that in some of these areas where it's been successful, we also have a large number of, let's say, multinational companies, et cetera, who are helping to lead that. What role does small business play in all of this? How do they participate in an active way because they don't have the structure to do so? And maybe the second thing is addressing the stigma around this. Is there anything that's happening in terms of messaging on a federal level to try to change that?
Well, let me answer the second part of that first. Within our Office of Apprenticeship, we have a division that is devoted basically to establishment of promotional campaigns as well as partnerships. And I say that because it's a very important, we understand that there is a very important need to alter public perceptions through paid media, through whatever sorts of campaigns we can initiate in cooperation with companies, which are our best evangelists for apprenticeship, to be perfectly honest about it. And indeed, in order for a company like Hilti is capable of spreading the word, the good word. You mentioned, for example, the fact that a lot of the apprenticeship growth that we've seen has been involved multinational companies, and there's a lot of truth to that. Zurich Insurance in Chicago initiated a few years back a very successful apprenticeship program in the financial services industry, in the insurance industry, which has since been emulated by similar companies like the Hartford and Aon in terms of developing their own apprenticeship programs with a very similar style and approach. For smaller companies, you're right, there is a challenge because, as I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's very difficult for a smaller company to do it all on its own. South Carolina, again, offers a very good example. They have established, and indeed this is true in many states increasingly, have established local consortia in particular sectors and in particular localities to essentially organically start growth of apprenticeship. Sometimes these involve chambers of commerce. Invariably, they involve educational institutions such as community colleges that would offer related instruction and really be able to boost the intellectual structure, the scaffolding that's necessary. And they can work with like-minded businesses to really be agents of growth. And so, in other words, I would be very careful to say that the Department of Labor can offer, and it does offer, all of the funding and services to try to support efforts. But ultimately, we cannot make apprenticeship happen on our own. We only have about 130 staff nationally in the entire Office of Apprenticeship. So we are not a particularly, we're a very lean and mean bureaucratic structure. But what we are going to utilize that staff on is spending it and targeting it as carefully as possible to see this sort of organic growth in local areas on the thinking that bottom-up growth of apprenticeship is more sustainable than top-down.
With that, I think I'm going to have to wrap it up, even though I can see that there is much more to say on this, and for those in the room, you can follow up this discussion afterwards even further. First, I'd like to thank our panelists. So, Zach and Mark and Anne-Marie, thank you very much for being a part of this discussion and for sharing your expertise. I know that I feel very much better briefed on the efforts that are going on, and really both the complexity and the diversity of the efforts that are going on from every side. So thank you so much for participating in this panel with us. I would especially like to thank Foreign Minister Hasler for opening up this discussion and giving us such a good basis to go forward with it. Ambassador Barber, of course, and your whole team at the Embassy of Liechtenstein for giving us this opportunity to look further into how this is developing within the United States and with our transatlantic partners. Thank you all, and I thank our online audience for their participation as well. We look forward to seeing you at another Wilson Center event sometime in the future. Thank you very much indeed.